"Sir, there's no chance this vault access is authorized under your name." The badge scanner beeped red before the sentence finished. Too sharp, too final, the kind of tone reserved for people the system had already decided about. Andre Whitfield stood in the marble hush of the private banking floor, holding a vault key that had been his for 6 years. His navy quarter-zip pullover, dark jeans, plain leather folio under one arm. 15 minutes earlier, he'd let an elderly client cut ahead of him in line without a word, and held the door for a courier struggling with a cart of deposit boxes. Nobody had looked at him twice walking in. That was exactly how he preferred it. The floor had gone quiet in the particular way expensive rooms go quiet, a hush built from soft carpet and softer lighting rather than silence itself. Teller stations lined one wall, brass and dark wood, a single word etched above them, Meridian Private. It was 2:14 in the afternoon. The vault level opened its appointment window at 2, and Andre had booked his slot 9 days earlier, the way the system required for boxes above a certain tier. Officer Ren Delacroix had been posted to this floor for 4 months. He'd flagged 3 vault requests in that time. All 3 had been black clients. He didn't track that number. He'd never had a reason to. Delacroix took the key from Andre's hand before Andre finished offering it, turned it in the light, checked it against a reference plate that didn't exist for this purpose. It was theater, and some part of him seemed to know it. "Card, please, and a second form of ID." Andre produced both without comment. Delacroix studied the license far longer than the process required, glancing between the photo and the man in front of him, then set it on the counter without returning it. He typed something into the terminal, deleted it, typed it again. 2 associates in tailored suits passed behind him toward the elevator bank, waved through with a nod from the floor manager, no ID requested, no hesitation in the manager's gait. Nobody asked them for anything. Andre noticed. He always noticed. "Give me a minute," Delacroix said, and walked toward the security office with the license still in his hand, phone already lifting to his ear. Through the glass wall, Andre watched him lower his voice and angle his shoulder away, the universal posture of someone saying something they didn't want overheard. He kept his hands visible on the counter, the way he'd trained himself a long time ago, and waited. A grandfather clock near the concierge desk ticked through 4 full minutes before anyone came back. The woman who emerged wore a charcoal blazer with a security patch, mid-50s, the unhurried certainty of someone who'd made this walk 100 times before. Her badge read Holloway. "Vault access on a 6-figure box," she said, letting it hang in the air like a question that wasn't one. "That's not something we process on a walk-in." "It's not a walk-in. I have a standing appointment. Box 114, booked 9 days ago through the client portal." "Whose name is on that box?" "Mine." Andre kept his voice level. "Same as it's been for 6 years." Holloway slid his license into her jacket pocket. 18 years doing this. You develop a read on people, and my read on you says something doesn't add up. Is there a problem with my account? Depends on you." She leaned one forearm on the marble. "How does someone your age end up with a box this size?" The question was absurd enough that it took Andre a full second to be sure he'd heard it correctly. Near the concierge desk, a man in a pressed suit suddenly found his phone very interesting. Andre exhaled once, thought about the growing quiet on the floor, the version of this afternoon he still wanted to have, and opened his banking app. He scrolled past the balance to the account holder field, his name, his 6-year tenure date, and turned the screen toward her. Holloway glanced at it for half a heartbeat. Screens can say anything. It has my account number, my name, the exact date I opened the relationship. Names are easy to type. She'd already moved the goalpost before he'd finished making his case because the proof had never actually been the point. Andre understood, in that moment, exactly where the afternoon was going. He'd stood in smaller versions of this room his whole life. He simply hadn't expected it in a building where his own signature appeared on the founding charter, 4 floors up, in a frame nobody on this level had ever been asked to notice. Holloway wasn't finished. She turned the license over, checked the hologram against the light a second time, then picked up the desk phone. Dispatch a secondary verification. Client on level 3, box 114, flagged. She listened to whatever came back, and her expression didn't change. Copy that. She hung up without repeating what she'd heard. What did they say? Andre asked. Account's clean. That's not the question I'm asking anymore. Then what is the question? Whether you're the kind of person this account belongs to. She said it plainly, the way you'd state a fact about the weather, and seemed almost surprised when the words landed as hard as they did. I'd like my documents back, he said, and access to my box. That'll happen once this clears verification. Holloway nodded to a young associate hovering near the vault door. Check his folio. You don't have grounds to search that. On this floor, I don't need your permission. It wasn't true, and some part of her likely knew it, but the floor was full of people who weren't going to stop her. The associate unzipped the leather folio and laid the contents across the counter. A folded statement, a pen, a small velvet box holding his late father's cufflinks brought in that afternoon to be appraised for insurance ahead of a family estate filing. Holloway lifted each item a beat too long, narrating with her eyes. See what we've got here. Then her fingers found something at the bottom, a slim, laminated card on a short lanyard. Andre's founding partner credential, his photograph, the bank's crest, the words managing partner printed in clean capitals. Something in Andre's chest lifted just slightly. That's my partner credential. Look at it. Really look. She glanced at it. She saw the crest. She saw the title. She saw the face matching the one across the counter from her. She set it aside, face down. Cards get made. Doesn't mean they're current. The cruelty of it was almost clean. The literal answer to every question she'd asked had been sitting in her own hand, and she'd turned it face down, because it didn't fit the story she'd already written before he'd said a word. A junior teller, Simone Okafor, stepped closer, 2 client folders still pressed to her chest. Sir, I processed his last 3 deposits myself. I recognize him. Stay out of it, Holloway said, not turning. Security matter. He hasn't done anything but ask for his own vault. One more word, and you're off this floor. The tone cut flat through the lobby. Simone's mouth closed, but her eyes stayed on Andre, an apology she had no power to make good on. The elevator chimed. 2 more officers stepped out, radios hissing. Holloway squared her shoulders, an audience now, and back up. We're going to need you to step away from the vault entrance, she said. On what grounds? Andre asked, still standing calm at the counter. On the grounds that I said so. Andre felt the old trap settle into his body. Resist, and the footage shows an angry black man in a private bank. Freeze, and they escort him out anyway. There was no version of stillness that saved him here. So he made his choice, set the velvet box gently back in the folio, raised both hands slow and open, and spoke clearly enough for the phones already lifting near the teller line. I am not resisting. I want this recorded. I am not resisting. Smart, Holloway said, and took his arm, guiding him toward a side security room off the main floor, glass-walled, visible to the entire lobby, exactly where every consultation for the last 3 years had been photographed for the client experience file nobody downstairs ever read. That was when the second officer, younger, name tag reading Park, noticed a folder sitting closed on the security desk inside the room. A folder he hadn't touched, hadn't opened, that had clearly been placed there before any of this began. Standard procedure said leave it. Something about the placement, dead center on an otherwise empty desk, made him pick it up instead. Department letterhead. Internal Compliance Division. A single paragraph highlighted in yellow. This assessment is active for the calendar quarter. Client interactions at Vault Access Level 3 and above are subject to blind integrity review. Reviewing personnel are not informed of active status. Findings trigger automatic escalation to the Board Conduct Committee. Park read it twice before the meaning caught up with him. He looked through the glass at Holloway, at the man standing calm with his hands still slightly raised, at the credential lying face down on the counter 12 feet away. "Ma'am," Park said quietly, "you should see this." Holloway didn't look yet. "Not now." "Now," Park said and held it up. She read it, standing in the doorway, and something in her posture changed the way a building settles after the last support beam goes in wrong. Because the compliance memo wasn't only warning her that misconduct would be reviewed, it named the specific box. Vault 114. The specific date. Today. The specific access holder whose treatment would be the measured outcome. Andre Whitfield wasn't only the client she detained. He was the metric. "You've been recording this the whole time," Holloway said, not quite a question. "No," Andre said. "The bank has. I didn't design today's test personally. I designed the policy that made today's test possible, 11 months ago, after the third complaint I read that nobody upstairs wanted to act on." Holloway's face didn't drain all at once. It happened in stages, the way frost takes a window. The elevator opened again. A woman in a tailored charcoal suit crossed the floor fast, heels striking marble, a tablet under one arm. Renata Cole, General Counsel. The only other person who'd known the assessment window was live today. "Mr. Whitfield." She didn't look at Holloway. "Confirm you're unharmed." "I'm fine." Andre rolled his wrists where the officer's grip had pressed too hard. "Pull the full floor footage. All 3 cameras. I want timestamps synced before anyone leaves this floor." "Sir, that's every camera on this level for the last 40 minutes. "I know exactly how many cameras are on this level." The freeze order went out within the hour. Every vault-adjacent transaction on the floor halted pending review, not because Andre demanded urgency for its own sake, but because the compliance framework he'd built 11 months earlier required exactly that trigger the moment a Level 3 interaction failed. By the next morning, Holloway had been placed on immediate leave pending termination, referred for wrongful detention and an unconsented search. Delacroix, the officer who'd first flagged the vault key, resigned before the hearing convened. In his exit statement, he said the quiet part out loud. He'd pulled 3 vault requests in 4 months and hadn't once asked whether the pattern meant anything. Hearing himself say it, the compliance officer taking his statement said his voice cracked on the last word. The internal audit that followed surfaced 11 prior flags tied to the same vault floor across 3 years, nearly all involving clients of color, each one previously closed as procedure followed correctly. Andre called every officer assigned to the private banking floor into a conference room the following week and played the footage without a word of introduction. All 3 angles synced, no gaps. The room watched a man approach a vault client, take a clean set of identification without reading it twice, dismiss a bank-issued credential as fabricated, and detain the bank's own managing partner for the offense of asking for something that was legally his. Nobody coughed for the full 9 minutes. "This happened on the vault floor," Andre said when it ended, "the same floor tied to 8 of our last 11 bias flags." He let that sit. Valid appointment, valid identification, a direct legal objection from the client himself, and at every stage, the response was to escalate. From the back, a compliance director with 20 years at the bank folded his arms. This was a setup. He walked in knowing the test was live. "I knew the policy existed," Andre answered evenly. "I did not design today's specific trigger, and I would have failed this review exactly as hard if the outcome had gone the other way. Every officer on this floor should treat every client the same way, whether they believe someone is watching or not." That landed harder than the footage had. 2 days later, the union's attorney, Garrett Soames, arrived in a gray suit and tried the only door available to him. The methodology was entrapment, he argued. The chief's personal presence during an active assessment was a conflict of interest. Nothing in the scenario had forced the outcome. Andre answered without raising his voice. A routine vault appointment, handled correctly, ends in 4 minutes. Officer Delacroix and Officer Holloway chose every step after that. He folded his hands. The integrity assessment policy is in the compliance memorandum your members' union signed 11 months ago. This investigation isn't mine. It belongs to the Independent Oversight Board. They already have all 3 angles. The Oversight Board, led by an external compliance director named Joan Hartley, returned its preliminary findings 2 nights later. 4 points, clean and unavoidable. The interaction lacked any documented basis for extended verification beyond 4 minutes. The search of personal belongings had no consent and no legal exception. The credential presented was authentic and was dismissed without review. The recommended disposition for both employees was formal termination, with Holloway's file additionally referred to outside counsel. Holloway was given 1 chance to speak before the board. She took it and reached for the only sentence she had left. "I had no way of knowing who he was." "That's the part you still don't understand," Andre said quietly. "You're not being terminated because of who I turned out to be. You're being terminated because of what you did to a man you decided was nobody. If I had actually been nobody, you would have gotten away with all of it." The room went still. Holloway's mouth opened and produced nothing. The silence finished the sentence for her. Then the 8 buried flags came back into the light, and one of them had a name. Denise Okonkwo Hart had been delayed at this same vault floor 2 years earlier, held for 40 minutes over what the file called a signature mismatch, later found to be a clerical error made entirely on the bank's side, never corrected, never acknowledged. She had quietly moved her family's holdings to a competing institution within the month and stopped telling people why because no one upstairs had ever believed the delay was anything but standard procedure. When Andre's office called to say her file was reopening, she went quiet for a long moment, then asked if this was some kind of joke. It was, in a way, just not the kind she meant. She came in the following week to close out the reopened file in person, though nothing required her to. She sat across from the new head of client relations for 11 minutes, mostly in silence, until she finally said the thing she'd never said to anyone at the bank 2 years earlier. That the 40-minute delay hadn't cost her the money, she could have absorbed that. It had cost her the meeting she was already running late to, a meeting where she'd been pitching her own firm's first institutional client, a deal that fell through that afternoon and didn't come back around for 18 months. Nobody had ever asked her what the delay actually took from her. The relations director wrote it down, word for word, and for the first time in 2 years, Denise watched someone at Meridian treat the cost of the delay as real. Her account was the first of the 8 to formally reopen. It would not be the last. Not every employee on that vault floor looked away during the footage review. Officer Park, the one who had found the folder and brought it forward instead of leaving it closed on the desk, was the first to come to Andre's office afterward, not to defend himself, but to ask what he should have done differently in the 4 minutes before he found it. Andre told him that the fact he was asking was most of the answer, and made a note of his name for reasons that had nothing to do with the hearing. Simone Okafor, the junior teller who'd tried to speak up on the floor and been told to stay out of it, was asked to give a statement to the Oversight Board the same week. She'd expected to be thanked. Instead, the first question was why she hadn't pushed harder in the moment, why she'd gone quiet after one warning instead of escalating herself. She answered honestly, because the last teller who'd pushed back on a security officer had been moved to a branch across the city within a month, and everyone on the floor knew it, and nobody needed to say it out loud. The board didn't have a rebuttal for that. Andre made sure the transfer policy was the very next item flagged for review after the hearing closed. Andre kept no trophy from any of it. The last thing he said on the conference table before the board adjourned was the folio with its velvet box and, beside it, the same compliance memorandum that had triggered the whole review. the only line he left the room with. The client detained today was me. It resolved quickly because of who I turned out to be. So ask yourselves honestly, what happens on this floor when the client doesn't have a credential in his bag? Nobody answered. He hadn't expected one. His father's cufflinks sit in a small glass case in his office now, not the vault, the smallest thing on the shelf and the one he looks at most. If you believe respect shouldn't depend on who someone turns out to be, let us know in the comments. Should Delacroix have been allowed to resign quietly, or should his name have gone into the same report as Holloway's? This is a fictional story created for storytelling purposes. All characters, names, institutions, and events are imagined.